which has to do with the role of revealed law. Principle number 9 actually says, to protect man's rights, God has revealed certain principles of divine law. Let me ask you this question. In the previous lesson, we discussed the fact that we have inalienable rights. Well, is that all we need to do, is just say we have rights? What do we have to do in order for those rights to be meaningful? What does there have to be? Inalienable duties, okay. What else does there have to be? It's fine for you to say, I have the right to life, I have the right to property, I have the right to liberty. But what has to have in place in order for those rights to be enforced and protected? A government with a set of laws, right? I mean, what good does it do to say you have a right if there's no law to protect that right? Do you understand? The law does not create the right, but it will protect that right in a responsible government. Do you understand that? Let's look at... So the question is, how are rights best protected? And for that answer, let's go again to Blackstone on page 131 in this quote. Are you with me? He says, but as He is also a being of infinite wisdom, he's talking about the Creator, He has laid down only such laws as were founded in those relations of justice that existed in the nature of things. These are eternal, immutable laws of good and evil, to which the Creator Himself in all His dispensation conforms. That's an interesting statement. And which He has enabled human reason to discover, so far as they are necessary for the conduct of human actions. Such, among others, are these principles: that we should live honestly, should hurt nobody, and should render to everyone his due. Why? Why are those the principles of our law? So that we can have our rights protected. Right? Everybody follow that? In order to have meaningful rights, there must be law to protect those rights. So that if somebody tries to take away those rights, they are restricted by the law. Okay? So, a code of divinely proclaimed law. Isn't that what Blackstone said? He has given a set of laws. That's all William Blackstone in his commentaries on the English law. But he doesn't stop there. He says where you can go to find those laws. Look at the next quote. He says, the principles, this is on page 132, the principles thus delivered by the Creator, we call the revealed or divine law. And they are to be found only in the Holy Scriptures. These precepts, when revealed, are found upon comparison to be really a part of the original law of nature, as they tend in all their consequences to man's felicity. What is found in the Holy Scriptures, he says? The original revealed or divine law, which is given to help protect man's inalienable rights. Once again, folks, Blackstone is saying that in the Holy Scriptures are found the divine revealed law, which are necessary to protect the inalienable rights that were given to us by our Creator. Does that make sense? The Creator gave us law to protect our rights. So really, if you're ever looking for source material on where you would go to find the basis of our government, where would you go? One of your sources would be the Holy Scriptures. So don't ever forget that, because some people say there is no basis of religion, or one person would say, for example, as they said to me, God isn't even mentioned in the Constitution. What do you mean God is the basis of American government? How would you answer that question? I'll ask you, does the Constitution mention God? No, it doesn't. No. No, it doesn't. Does that throw you? Doesn't mention God. Why doesn't it? Because it's not the purpose of the Constitution to mention God. The Constitution sets up our form of government based on the principles that the founders said are found in Holy Writ. But it doesn't mention God. But then your answer should include this. But there's another founding document that we have, and that is the Declaration of Independence. And that mentions the Creator all through it. That's one of the purposes of it, to form the basis for the reason we're doing things. Do you all understand that? So don't get thrown with that little argument that there is no foundation of religion or mention of God in the Constitution. All right. See, we need to know how to answer these people who say this. Otherwise, if you don't know the answers, you might get to believe in what they're telling you nowadays. Certainly not what the founders said. Okay. So Blackstone says they're found in the Scriptures. Now let's see if we can identify some of them. For example, see where we are here. And we should say that sound principles of law are based on natural or God's law. These revealed laws. Well, what are they? For example, he would say, I've created all of these things. I've created all of you. I've created all of the earth and everything on it. Therefore, you need to look to me really as the ultimate good. Remember the Anglo-Saxon term for God means ultimate good? You need to look to me as the ultimate good. In other words, I am supreme over everything that I have created. And that conforms with what John Locke said, right? Whoever created all of this has got to be supreme over all of it. All right? The next thing he says is, don't attribute what I have done to some rock or some piece of wood. Have you ever noticed that? How sometimes people will carve out in stone or carve out of wood some figure and kneel down and worship it as their God. He says, don't do that. Keep in view the real Creator. Don't attribute my creations to some inanimate object. But you know there are people who do that, right? And so he says it how? How does he say it? Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Know what he says it? Okay. And then he says, when you speak of me, have reverence, because I am supreme. I have done all of these things for you. Don't drag my name through the mire and muck of the gutter. Have you heard people do that? Yes. Have respect, because I have done all of these things for you. Show a little gratitude. So how does he say it? Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. Isn't that amazing? These are all parts of revealed laws to help us in our inalienable rights. Then he says something kind of interesting. He says, I want you to take some time once in a while and study the law that I give you. Besides your own work and your own studies, I want you to study my law, which is the perfect law of liberty. That's what he called it. And I want you to do it periodically. How often do you think he wants you to do that? How about once every 7 days? And some people might choose a different day than others. You know, some people do it on a Saturday, some people do it on a Sunday. Okay. But take 1 day in 7. There's something kind of interesting about that 1 day in 7. Did you know that when the communists took over Russia, a little bit later, they decided that they wanted to get more production out of the people because, you know, the communist system just doesn't engender a lot of production. Well, we're going to get more production out of the people, and we're going to get rid of this Christian influence, so we're going to do away with the Sabbath day, the day of rest. So they had them work straight through. What do you think happened? Did the production increase? No, it decreased. And they said, well, I guess we're going to have to give some time off, but we're not going to give 1 day in 7. That's too Christian, too biblical, too religious. We're going to give them 1 day in 10. Guess what happened? For some reason, the human structure is just not built to take 1 day in 10, but 1 day in 7. So that's kind of what they had to yield to. How do you like that? So, what?
I would not like that at all.
What, 1 day in 10? You wouldn't like that? 1 day in 7. And what does he say to do? Do his work, study his law, care for people. You know, we all know people who need help, don't we? People who need to be cared for, whether it's aged parents or neighbors. And I just think it's kind of interesting. He could say, you know, I could send an angel to care for them, but I don't want to do that. I want to send you. And that's a particularly nice thing to do on this day. Yeah, there's lots of things to do on that day. Okay, isn't that interesting? How does he say it? Observe the Sabbath day, keep the Sabbath day holy, do all your work on the other 6 days. Study my law, at least on that 1 day. Isn't that interesting? Okay, 1 day each week set aside. All right? Then he says, I have put you here in families where you have a mother and a father who nurture and raise their children, hopefully teach them my law until they're old enough to be on their own. I have found that is the best system in which to raise proper citizens, good citizens, strong citizens. So I want to keep this intact. So what does he say? What does he say to the children? Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land, so forth. Right? I don't know, do you honor your father and your mother all the time? Or do we need to be reminded about that? The best way for a happy home is to honor each other. Sure, the parents honor the children, children honor the parents. You know, I think it's kind of interesting. do you ever get into a discussion, an adversarial situation, an argument with your parents? Anybody ever done that? Okay. And that seems to happen once in a while, doesn't it? Especially with teenagers in the home. Let me just give you a little perspective. First of all, we're usually working with good people. Have you noticed that? You're good people. And your parents, most of whom I know, are good people. I mean, nobody wants to kill somebody. Nobody wants to harm you. Every once in a while you might find some weird situation like that, but mostly not. So we're working with good people. Let me ask you this question, young people. What would be the real harm in obeying your parents the first time, even though you might not quite understand why? Knowing that they're good people and that they're not going to ask you to do anything that will harm you, what is really wrong with you honoring them to the point where you will say, yes, Mother, I will be happy to do that? Whoa, you try that. You try that. You know what'll happen? I'll tell you what'll happen. No, you won't have a boring life. I'll tell you what'll happen. After a while, your mom will say, probably to your dad, you know, we better watch out what we ask Katie to do. She'll do it. Whoa. And if you do it automatically, and you do it and build that rhythm of obedience, what will happen the next time you want to borrow the family car? They'll let you. That's the way it works with good people. Anyway, just a little suggestion. So how does he say it? Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land. Okay, we've said that. And then when you get to be my age and go through the experience of seeing your parents aging and some very tender times. I was helping my own father a week ago button up his shirt. And he looked at me and he started to cry. And he said, I'm just so thankful, in his very weak ability to speak. I'm just so grateful that you're here to help me. I was just buttoning up his shirt. And I said to him, well, Dad, you remember there was a time, many times, that you helped me button up my shirt. I don't even remember those times, but you do. So we kind of had a little bonding going on there. And anyway, it's great. It was great. I hope you have the kind of experience with your parents that I have with mine as they get older and less able to do for themselves. And then to see one of them pass on, it's just a great experience. One that you will probably all have one day. Because they're people too, you know. Right? Okay. And then he says, now, I've given each of you the inalienable right to life. Life is so precious. I didn't create you to kill each other off. I gave you life. And I want everybody to respect the fact that I have given each of you life. Therefore, what? I don't want any of you to go around killing. How does he say it? Thou shalt not kill. Respect for human life. Okay? Preserves the sanctity of human life. Actually, when you think about it, if you don't take the life of a murderer, what are you saying about his life in respect to the life of his victim? What are you saying about the life of his victim? It's more, it's what? It's less sacred than his life. So you can't have that. We all have equal, inalienable rights to life. Okay? Then what does he say? Well, first of all, I've given you this family, and I want you to maintain the integrity of this family. Once you make a covenant with somebody, as husband and wife, to be with them, to honor them, to cherish them, you don't go running off with anybody else. How does he say it? Thou shalt not commit adultery. You stay true to your covenants. It will bless your life. It will bless the lives of your children. Right? We strengthen marriage bonds by being loyal to your spouse. And then he says, you might see something that somebody has, and you might be tempted to do what? Well, before that, to take it. Have you ever borrowed something and never returned it? Yeah. Have you ever borrowed something and returned it back in a broken condition? What is that really? That's stealing. It's depriving somebody of their property. How does he say it? Thou shalt not steal. Folks, do you see how that this maintains the sanctity of your inalienable right to property? Everybody respects each other's property. Wouldn't it be great if we didn't have to have locks on our doors? Wouldn't it be great if you didn't have to have locks on your lockers here at school? Because everybody respected each other's property. That would be wonderful. But, okay, by not stealing. Then he says, I don't want you to go around saying things about people that aren't true. You know how, what do we call that? We call it lying. We call it gossip. There is hardly anything more destructive in an environment of a group of young people than gossip. And you know how gossip can get out of control. That's why we try to squelch that here at this school. Gossip is so damaging. And he says, how does he say it? Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Speak the truth. You remember the little saying, if you always tell the truth, you what? Do you know this saying?
You never have to worry.
You never have to remember what you said. Oh, you start telling little white lies. You got to remember what you said so you can what? Tell another little white lie to cover that one up. But if you always speak the truth, you never have to remember what you said. Remember that. That's great. Okay? Do not lie. And then he says, you might see something that you like of somebody else and begin to what? Wish you had it. What's the rule? If you want what somebody else has, what? You go out and earn your own. This is the gospel of work. That's the way to get it. So how does he say it? Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, thy neighbor's goods, thy neighbor's animals, and anything that's in thy neighbor's. Well, haven't we gone over some very basic laws that make society happy? Yes. Who would object to these? What do we call these, by the way? That's correct. We call them the Ten Commandments. And the Ten Commandments are written where? In the book of, in the Old Testament, the book of Exodus, chapter 20. Very good. Now I want to ask you this question, because I want you to understand that these basic laws are the basic laws of all civilized society. right? Don't kill.